Your regular Bill? Oh, here's Bill. You're muted, Bill. There you go.
I caught myself before somebody had to say you're muted.
Yes, you did good.
How is everyone doing today?
Good.
All right. Just dropping the kids off at camp for the final day. Final day of camp. So sorry for being a moment late. How is everyone doing today? We are recorded. How are we all doing? Glorious. Okay. All right. So what I have in mind today to discuss is about standards. So I'm going to give everyone a heads up that I'd like today to be a bit more interactive than normal. And I want to hear from each of you a little bit about what that means to you, right? What does standards mean to you? How is that different from some of the other words that we oftentimes use when they should consider it a standard, something like a goal or a commitment or something like that? Because a lot of times what we do is we throw up some task or some obligation or some thought, and then we don't have a system in place to get it done, and we might not have the time to get it done, or we might not have assigned the time and assigned the level of priority to get it done, and then it doesn't happen, and then it just becomes one more thing that our brain has kind of wanted to do but didn't get done. And subconsciously what happens is it's hard on your brain, right? You're allowing your brain to experience the disappointment, and then the next time that your brain comes up with an idea and you're getting excited about it, that thought starts creeping into your mind around, it's just another one of these times that I'll say, I want to sell 50 homes. Brain can't do that, right? And you're at a disadvantage from the very beginning. So there's kind of like, let me kind of take the pulse of the group by asking this question. So there's kind of two ways that we tend to set goals. Some people like to set smaller goals so that they can achieve them. And some people like to set really big goals so it'll push them, knowing they may or may not hit the goal, but whatever happens, it'll be better than what would have happened had they not set that high goal, right? Let's just go around real fast. What do you guys tend to do, and what makes you feel more comfortable? Shout it out. Ryan, it looks like you're headed towards the mute.
Yeah, I like big goals. I think that, I have big, like, annual type goals, and then I always have daily goals, and I always try to get everything done that I want during the day, but it rarely happens, and I know that. Like, if I've never finished my to-do list ever. But I keep going, and then I think with an annual goal, it's big because that, I think otherwise, if you got to a smaller goal, you'd be like, okay, I'm done for the year.
Right.
Okay. But if you know, like, I got to keep going, that's just, but I think that you also have to have some smaller goals that you can achieve, or you get discouraged. But
okay, so let me go into a little bit more depth with that. So what I think you're saying is whatever kind of disappointment or frustration you might experience by not completing the to-do list, or by not potentially hitting that really high mark that you're setting for yourself, what I think I'm hearing is that disappointment doesn't, like, it's not paralyzing to you. It's actually kind of incentivizing. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Is there anybody that kind of feels the opposite way? Anybody that feels the opposite way, or anyone that feels the way Ryan feels and just wants to, chat about it for a second?
No, I would say, Melissa, I feel the same way as Ryan. It's very similar to what I do for myself.
Okay, so there's some people that they'll set a big goal and then they won't hit it, and it'll paralyze them, right? And it sounds like, Melissa, that's probably not the case for you. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah, I don't really let that happen.
Okay, beautiful. So I'm going to encourage you guys to think about which direction tends to be in closer alignment to you, And well, let's make sure, first of all, that we're setting goals in the appropriate way. What I think of as standard, how do you guys define the word standard? What is a standard?
And economy must increase.
I mean, this is Chris. I feel like standard is what typically a general consensus would agree upon. I personally don't necessarily think is a standard because it's always going to be in the eyes of the boat holder. So I don't know how you would kind of address that in our business because
Well, each of us would be in charge of setting standards for our organization, right?
It's
Okay,
So
like
I-
expectations, setting expectation, like that's the expectation when you work with me. It's gonna be that standard or better.
okay.
Right.
I wasn't going to head down that path, but I'm glad you said that. So there's kind of a couple different ways of talking about standards. There's one for what are the standards of my sales organization, and then what are the standards of, let's say, service when you're going out into the field and you're asking people to give you an opportunity to work with you. So you might say something like, my standard is to return all phone calls before the end of the day. Right. So if I don't return phone calls by the end of the day, then you should assume that I'm on the side of the road somewhere and I need help. Call the cops. Right. So that's a standard to me, that is the minimum acceptable number or the minimum acceptable service level. Right. So the standard for, like the Moe's, like the burrito place, you walk in, they say, welcome to Moe's. That's the standard. If you don't say that, you don't work there. It's non-negotiable. Is that right? Okay, so who wants to volunteer some standards that they have for themselves? Let's start with that. And then if you want, you can share standards that you've incorporated into your business. And the next thing I'm going to say is, are you sharing those standards with those people around you? So what standards do you have in your life? Do you brush your teeth every day?
yes,
Take a shower every day?
yes.
Do you think there's anything, I'll assume those that are on mute also do the same thing.
Fingers
Uh,
crossed.
Yeah. Well, I mean, maybe that's why you're not showing your face, right? All right, I'm just messing with all y'all. Okay, so is there anything in your business that you treat with that level of standard? Have you guys thought about it that way before?
Well, there are certain things that are standards for me. Like I don't go out and show clients property. I won't show more than one or two properties without a buyer's brokerage agreement signed and without proof of funds or a pre-approval from a lender.
Okay, I love that. And Pam, let me test you on that for a second. If I'm your buyer and you are my buyer's agent and I am resistant to that, what happens?
And this has happened, I talked to you about why it's important, why it commits me to you, and by you being committed to me, I treat you with the highest standard possible. I treat you, I have, you're a top priority for me. And if they still refuse to sign it, I wish them the best in their house hunt. And I have done that.
That's a standard. Now, a way that the standard would be essentially completely eliminated is by Pam saying, oh, well, this one's a $600,000 buyer. I really want to get it. So I'll make an exception this time.
Yeah, I don't treat
Right.
people different based on the price home that they're interested in. And I actually had a recent buyer, first time home buyer, make a comment to her spouse, and the spouse told me, said, Pam didn't treat us like a first time home buyer. She treated us like we were buying $1 million house.
I can't tell you how proud I am to hear that, by the way. but I didn't mean to assume and imply that
No, I know
did.
you didn't. I know you didn't, but
That's
you were just
exactly
making
what
a
a
point.
standard. That's exactly what a standard is, by the way, right? A kind of a brush off of your standard would be to say, oh, this is my friend, so I'll treat him this way. Or, oh, this is a special referral, so I'll treat him this way. Or, oh, they're buying an expensive place, so I'll treat him this way. A standard is the non-negotiable, right? What's an example of another standard you might have for your business or for your interactions with clients?
You know, if they're late, and I call late more than 15 minutes late, because I get that traffic happens or, that sort of thing. But if they're late all the time, we have a conversation about that.
Okay.
Because,
And
because we have set, and I'm talking about for, buyers, we have set appointments. They are at specific times. Yes, stuff happens, but if it happens on a regular basis, then you need to realize you need to leave earlier. And
right. You know what? This
at
is
what
the first
point does that
ever
not
been
click
traffic
in?
in Georgia.
What's that?
You know, this is the first time there's ever been a traffic jam in Atlanta. I just can't believe it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And we don't have any apps that tell us about this either.
Right. So I assume that once you have that conversation with somebody and then they're late, what happens then?
I'll leave.
Right. And if they show up with like an ice cold Starbucks and that's the reason why they're late, then they get a little look before you leave, right?
Oh, definitely.
That will happen to all of you. Be ready.
Yes.
Okay, so all right, Pam, thank you. I'm glad that you've established a couple standards. I'm sure you have plenty more. I cannot express to you how kind of it's almost liberating when you hold standards. So somebody else give me an example of a standard.
Well, I was just gonna kind of twist on what Pam said, just the time thing of a standard for you could just be you are always on time or you're always 5 minutes early for every appointment. Like that's just a standard that you live by and your clients would learn to expect that. If you're late, they're going to be late. Like that's just a different way to twist that.
100%. 100%. Okay, let's go to the next level. So what standards, let me back up for a second. I want to make sure everyone completely understands something. This is really, really important. You are all business owners. Okay, you are the entire sales force, you are the entire employment team, and you are also the CEO. So if you've worked in any other organization before, and no matter what role you held, you had colleagues that did other parts of the job that needed to get done for the whole mission of the organization to be fulfilled, right? So let's say you worked in a restaurant, you were a waiter. Okay, well, your teammate, so to speak, was the guy in the back cooking food, right? Or if you worked in, a sales organization, you had the manufacturing people that were your teammates, you had the middle managers that were your teammates, and each of them did whatever they had to do in order for the whole mission of the company to get done. Here's the news flash. Y'all have all those. You have all those, okay? Which means you need to potentially learn how to execute on all these arenas that you might not be so familiar with. And you need to set standards for each of those things, right? So if we know what our goals are, right? If we know where we're headed, let's say we know we want to make $100,000. Okay, well, we have a plan for that. We've called it the 4-3-2-1 plan. We set 4 appointments a month. We hold 3, we take 2, we close 1. 1 times 12 is 12 sales. At an average commission of a little over 10 grand, you'll net your 100,000. Okay. So with that said, what's the difference between a goal and a standard?
Standards are what's always, you can count on it. That's what you're going to do. That is the expectation, like everyone was saying. A goal is something that you aspire to obtain. Standard, you already have it. That's how I would kind of feel about it.
So when, let's say, Chris, you have a goal, let's say your objective is to talk to 20 people today. Do you consider that to be a goal or a standard?
Well, like when in our plan, I'm supposed to talk to X amount. My standard would be the minimum, and then the goal would be something. Again, I'm kind of like Ryan and Melissa. I like to overshoot because things happen, and I don't want to just do the bare minimum. And so my goal would be something else. So that's how I'm looking at it in that regard.
Okay, let's put some real numbers to it. How many people does your plan require that you speak to a day?
I think it was 14.
Okay, 14. So 14, according to what I think I'm hearing, that's your standard.
Correct.
And your goal might be 20, right?
Exactly. Something exponential, something higher. Exactly.
Okay, so let's say you go about your day, you kind of state that to the world at the beginning of the day, right? And then you got it, you know, a day progresses and you've been distracted and you had to meet this person, blah 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 blah, and it's 5:30 and you've talked to 8 people. What happens?
You still keep going. I mean, it's all dependent upon how. Hopefully, I've managed my day and my time and organized it in a manner where I'm accounting for potential slip ups. If I'm going to hold myself to a certain standard, I need to be able, just like what Pam said, you got to be able to cut things at an endpoint. There's some things that obviously you're going to be willing to compromise, but if I have a meeting or something scheduled for an hour and we're going in an hour 15 hour 30, I've got to be able to find that way to finesse and kind of still create that sense of urgency for myself to move on to the next task. I would hope that I would have the ability to do so, where it wouldn't throw me so far off that I wouldn't be able to at least make that minimum standard that I've set for myself.
Okay, so you brought up a couple of things I want to chat about. The first is how important are expectation setting, right? If you sit down with a seller and say, or when you're pre-qualifying the seller and you're going through that list of questions, you might say, hey, just so you know, our meeting will take somewhere between 45 minutes to an hour. Will that be okay? Okay, so when you sit down with them the following day, let's say, they expect to be there an hour maximum, right? And that gives you an opportunity to get up and get out of there when the hour's over. And you need to build your presentation in a way that you can say what you need to say, you can address any issues, and you can get out of there within an hour. The worst thing that you could do to a seller is sit down and start blabbing, and they have no idea how long you're going to be blabbing at them.
Correct.
You know what I'm saying?
I mean, I think part of it would be also the practicing. If you've got your presentation kind of down packed and the verbiage is almost second nature, I feel like the fumbling and the stumbling would be less likely than someone who's just going and winging it.
Oh, I mean, that is about as big of a fact as you can possibly state, right? If you practice your presentation, the words are going to come out naturally. If you wing it, it's going to be clear to the other party that you're winging it. Guys, we're in a skill-based marketplace right now, right? It's challenging to get a deal. Okay, you got to be super skillful in negotiations and strategy and expectation setting if you want to help a buyer win. And you better be pretty impressive, particularly with a stranger, if you're on the seller side, because you're basically looking at them and say, hey, I'm worth 15 grand, even though you could probably call this guy and pay a lot less. So if you don't share with them why you're worth the extra money, then they won't pay it to you, right? So maybe explaining what your standards are would help identify that, right? So if, let's say John is the seller and Ryan and I go into the listing appointment. Ryan's one listing agent, I'm the other. And I say, okay, I want to let you know the mission of my sales organization, right? Our goal is to create clients for life. Because when we have clients for life, we can be a partner and an advisor as they're building wealth through real estate throughout their life. Okay. The reason, the way that we do that is by creating standards for our sales team. We have communication standards, we have time standards, we have learning standards, right? And that's how we operate, right? Want to learn more? Great. Okay, Ryan comes in there and she's like, so how you doing today? And it's completely winged. Who do you think is going to get the deal?
Thanks, Bill.
Well, I'll use you.
Kidding. Just kidding. You would get
Right.
the deal, sure.
I would get the deal, right? So if you express your standards to people, do you think it's impressive? Okay, so what if I told you that if you looked at the plan, right? So let's say the plan for a $100,000 net agent, right? 12 units, 4 appointments, set, 3 held. What if we said that's your standard? So guys, your standard, let's just say, is to hold 3 individual appointments per month. Let's just assume that's your goal. 3 individual appointments per month. If we say that that is now your standard, do you approach that any differently?
I would
Does
say
that change the way you think around it?
I would say yes, because you're making a commitment. You're committing to a standard and you're more likely to uphold that because you're making an actual commitment.
Okay, so Donna, thank you. It sounds like that's helpful to you, right? You view that wording a little bit differently, and that might be just the push you need to get to your 9 contacts a day when you might be at 7 o'clock at night and had 6. Like, if that's my standard, after dinner, I might run to Target and walk the aisles until I find 3 more people to talk to. If it's a goal, I'm like, I'm tired, whatever. Do y'all feel that way? So we know Donna does. Who else?
I agree.
Yes, sir.
I agree 100%.
Okay. So, it was interesting the way Chris described it, because sometimes I think about it the opposite way, where a standard is the lowest number and the goal is like some kind of like a little bit more aggressive or aspirational. Sometimes I would think about it the other way, but come to think about it, I kind of like the way you stated it, Chris. So what do you think would happen in your world if some of the things that you've been calling goals, you started to call standards? And then what do you think would happen in your world if you started sharing some of that stuff? Like, it is my standard that I exercise for 30 minutes a day. It is my standard that I have dinner with my family. It is my standard that I call my mother every day. I'm not saying these are my standards. I'm just saying, what if you adopted some of these things?
Yeah, so when you share it, it kind of adds a level of accountability to it too, because now other people know about it and you're more likely to live up to it.
Okay.
Piggybacking off of what Donna said, I think it's exactly right. When you when you put certain things in that criteria, it's gonna then it's gonna change your mindset. It has no choice but to change it, because things that weren't standards and requirements before now are. So the person who you were prior to you making those your standards, that person doesn't exist. So it's kind of like you're leveling up a little bit more.
Okay, I love the way you said that. So let's piggyback on that for a second. Ebony, let's fast forward 6 months. Okay. And you are on the pace you're on right now, which is, by the way, crushing it. Okay. And you are ready to hire an assistant. Okay. And when you sit down with that person, what's that kind of, do you just say, hey, come in and help me? Of course not. You come in and say, here's my expectation of you. My expectation is you'll be here at this time. You will do this type of work. This is the list of the things that if you execute this, you're winning. If you don't execute this, you may not have a job here. Right? Is that a set of standards?
Absolutely. Like, you've taken a lot of time to build your standards, and you can't have setbacks because somebody else comes in. So it's kind of like taking control. Like, this is your destiny. Like, this is the trajectory that you see yourself in. And it's either you're going to let somebody else set you back, or you're going to let them know, here's the bar, exceed it.
That's right. That's exactly right. So let me push you a tiny bit, Ebony. Has Ebony, the CEO of the Ebony Eccles organization, ever had a conversation with Ebony Eccles, the worker bee, to say, here are your standards? You speak to 10 people a day, you book an appointment a week, you practice for 20 minutes a day, you report your numbers. Have you ever had that kind of conversation?
Not out loud. The CEO needs to speak up a little bit more and make sure that the employee is committed to doing this always, or the employee has to go.
Or the employee needs more coaching, or some mindset shift, or maybe an accountability partner, or some more training, or something like that, right? You're not going to like quit. You're just going to have a conversation with the person to say, hey, what kind of resources or information do you need to incorporate into your world in order to be a better worker? Right? Hey, CEO, I need this piece of technology that'll help me do my job. Okay, great. So CEO, go buy it. You see what I'm saying? And by the way, this is a tiny bit off topic, but like Donna and I were talking this morning about, we didn't use the word standards, but she's been working with a vendor who, in her opinion and mine, the vendor behaved in a way that was unacceptable. Okay. That is a standard that has been crossed, and that relationship is now over. You see what I'm saying? So do you have standards for your partners, for the people that you bring into your world and expose to your valuable client to do their segment of the job? Right?
Absolutely. They are an extension of you.
That's right.
So what they do is going to ultimately affect you. So they have to meet that same bar that you're meeting, and you require everybody else, whether they're on your team or just, extensions, to meet. So they don't get a pass.
Very well said. That's exactly right. Because if I'm going to work every day to try to wow them and to try to give them a 10 plus experience, my partners better be the same. Right? Because just like we can go out, just like your consumer can go out and choose one of 40,000 agents in town, there's probably 10,000 plumbers. So if the plumber screws up, I'm going to go find a different one. You better be on your best behavior. This is not a joke. There are standards here. Okay, so is anyone willing to kind of publicly state that the things that we have been calling goals in the past, you're prepared to call a standard? Are you willing to claim that those will get done no matter what? When I was in Bold a long time ago, our coach said, look, if you don't get a listing, like, your standard is to get a listing every month. If you don't get a listing, we got to list your home. You got to sell something this month. I know that's a little bit of an embellishment, but like, do you kind of see how far this should be treated? Does it make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, who is prepared to state it doesn't, let's say your goal requires 14 contacts. We got to start small a little bit. Sometimes, maybe you don't need to, but if you're kind of new to this idea of standards, maybe you say my goal is 14, but I am going to commit. Absolutely. Like, there is never going to be a scenario where this does not happen. I'll go to Target in the middle of the night and walk the aisles if I have to. Right? Can you commit to 10? And you get a week or so of committing to 10 and executing on 10, and you build a lot of momentum, and then 14's a breeze. What are you guys hearing today?
To push yourself just a little bit more and to prioritize the things that you say that you want. Goals is something that sometimes you can hit, sometimes you don't hit. But if you're making it a standard, you're putting a different spend on it. So whereas a different spin on it, so whereas it's not, oh, someday. No, no, no. That day has came. That day is now. This is what it is every day.
Right. And I love that. And that also ties back to what Ryan said at the very beginning, which is you have kind of a little bit more of a short-term goal or a long-term goal. Like, let's say this is my intention for the course of the year. And then you got to chunk that down to say, only way that's going to happen is if I do this particular set of tasks today. Right. So if you want to be the master at the listing presentation by the end of August, let's say, you're not just going to be able to show up for an hour on August 30th and expect it to happen. You might need to have a standard of, I do my listing presentation out loud 3 times a day, every day in the month of August. And by the end of the month of August, I could say that thing in my sleep. And when you're that confident about what to say and how to deal with the objections that might come, guess what? You get to be a really good listener, because you're going to be able to listen for things that the seller might say that might be, kind of a little casual, but that really indicates something's going on. Or you may notice a weakness in their motivation, or you may notice the way they speak, right? We've talked about the way they speak, right? If they speak in very, like if they're an auditory person, they use words like, uh, hear and sense and these kind of things, you can respond in kind the same way so that you build rapport, right? So, I mean, we're kind of getting off topic a tiny bit, but if you're listening, you can pick up little things like that. If you're worried about what you're going to say next, you can't listen at all. You're going to be a poor listener. And what that seller needs more than anything, guys, is to be listened to. Okay. So I'm going to ask you to think through, how can we incorporate standards into our lives? Perhaps today you look and you say, you know what? I'm prepared to add a standard for my health. As of today, I don't hit the sack until I do 10 push-ups. Maybe that's your standard. Okay. Maybe you say, okay, it's time for a standard for my business. Everyone says I'm supposed to lead generate 2 hours. So I block 2 hours away, and that's my standard. Nothing gets in the way. That's what has to happen for this business to continue the momentum. So it's non-negotiable. So if something comes up with your kid, okay, fine. But you got to find that you got to replace the time somewhere else. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Is there anyone here who, and you have my permission to challenge me on this, obviously. Does anyone think that what we've talked about today is just kind of a bunch of hokey pokey stuff?
I think it gets us on the right track. I mean, it helps us with our mindset, how we look at things, so that we actually achieve our goals.
That's right. So a lot of times these morning huddles, they feel more like teaching, right? They're like, okay, let me teach you about a 36 touch. Let me teach you about mindset. Let me teach you about the listing presentation. My intention was for this one to sound a little bit more on the coaching side, which is, if you don't have standards for your business, guys, then you're not as impressive as you could be. And you're less impressive than you should be to your prospects and to your colleagues and to yourself, right? You might have to have a conversation, Ebony, for example, and say, look, the standard, if you want to work here, you got to do this. And if you do this, we celebrate and everyone's winning. And if you don't do this, something's got to change, right? So that meeting, so to speak, that's what we call planning time, right? That's what I have suggested you do on Sunday night or first thing Monday morning, right? Where you say, how did I do this past week? Am I on track? Did I set do my goals require that I talk to 60 people and I talk to 15? Okay, so how are we going to adjust what we're going to do this week instead of what we did last week? Because if we do what we did last week, we'll hit 15 again. Then we'll be even farther behind. So you might have to cancel an appointment. You might have to wake up a little earlier. You might have to stay up a little later. Because the people who are building successful businesses, they adhere to standards more often than people who do not build successful businesses. Because they tolerate less excuses, quite frankly. Okay, is everyone still alive here?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Marquita,
Yeah, I'm still alive here. I think one other thing I think I got from you. Well, can you hear me?
Yeah, absolutely. This is Joe, by the way.
Hey, everybody.
What's up, Joe?
Hey, Joe.
So one thing I think I got from it too is how you shown how goals, standards, and planning all correlate together. And what I mean by that is just like you have your standards, then you have your goals, but you have to have your plans to get to your goal too as well. And it's the same as, like, for example, you take it down to I want to go to the gym and I want to be able to bench press, 400 pounds or something like that. My standard has to be I have to go to the gym and I have to work my way up to that goal, which is my plan. How am I going to lift 400 pounds? I can't just go into the gym and lift that 400 pounds. I got to work myself to that. But then once I get there, that goal could then turn into a standard. And I raise I raise my standards up higher. So I have higher standards, higher expectations and stuff. And then I change my goal again so that, going from there once I'm doing it consistently. But that's what I got. Really all correlate together. You got to have your goal, your plan, and your standard. You're like your starting point, basically.
Love that. Love that. You reminded me about, there's a guy named Brendan Bouchard, who's like a big high performance habit coach. And it's interesting the way that your mind works. This is an example that he gave. Let's say that you are trying to quit smoking. Okay. You smoke cigarettes, you're trying to quit smoking. And somebody offers you a cigarette. And you say, I'm trying to quit. Okay, that's one response. Okay, next response. Somebody offers you a cigarette and you say, I'm a non-smoker. Right? So in one scenario, it's something kind of external that is threatening your standard. The other is you've now incorporated into your being, right, this standard of not being a smoker. What do you think is more of a powerful defense against that threat? The first response or the second response?
The latter.
What'd you say, Joe?
I said the latter.
Yeah, exactly. Because, I'm trying to quit. And they're like, oh, come on, let's have a cigarette. And you're like, okay, fine. Right? But if I say, hey, I'm a non-smoker, they're going to be like, oh, okay, I can respect that. You see what I'm saying? So are you the kind of person who lead generates every day as a standard? Or do you wake up and you check your email and see if you can get distracted in any way? And if you get around to it, you might call a person or two. Right? Are you the kind of person who, as a professional real estate agent, studies the market for 5 minutes every morning and looks at the new listings and the new pendings and all that, and the new stats as a law, as a rule, as a standard? Because you're committed to learning the market so you can help your people? Or do you just put the Chartmasters thing on your calendar and hope to make it whenever it comes out each month, and that's your version of learning the market? Is it intentional or is it kind of random? Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Marquia, this is probably the quietest I've ever seen you on a morning call.
I was getting ready.
You must be deep in contemplation.
No, I was getting ready.
Okay. What have you learned today?
Just really I think when you make things a standard versus a goal, it's a mindset shift. That, like how you said, is pretty much where you don't make any excuses. When you was asking what a standard is, and I feel like it can be challenging at times, because I feel like at times most people are scared of their own success. And just like how you said, if you make your standard to not go to sleep until you talk to 5 people, it's almost kind of a scared sense of success in a sense. So sometimes I feel like we hold ourselves back from the success that we can have. And if we shift it from a goal to a standard, I think that we'll all be a lot more successful, and we won't be in our own way.
That is exactly what I wanted to hear. That very, very well said. Very, very well said. Sometimes we are afraid of our own success. And I want to let you know that no matter how successful you get, you're going to have a partner in Candace and I and the Market Center and the leadership team to help you get the appropriate resources that you need to figure out that area of your business and take it to the next level. Okay. We've got people that are selling thousands of homes a year at Keller Williams. Okay. So don't be afraid of your success. You got partners here that can help you with your challenges and your limiting beliefs and all that stuff. Okay. Couple quick housekeeping things. I'm heading into the office in just a second. We're going to have an all-day lead generation day. If you'd like to participate, come on in. We'll help you make calls, scripts, whatever, and hopefully put a little supportive environment around you. Next week, we're going to be combining the huddles. So all the huddles will be starting at 8:30 in my room. And there's a core curriculum that Gary Keller used to teach, or really still teaches, called the 6 Personal Perspectives. Next week, we're going to be going through that list. Okay. And I also want to remind you, there are a number of people who have not reported their numbers. If you could just take a quick minute to do that, catch up for me for the month of July. And what else? And next Thursday, I think it's from 1 to 3, I put it on the calendar, is Chart Masters. Andy and Leslie are doing Chart Masters. So I want to make sure that is something that you guys are blocking off. Donna, were you trying to say something?
No, it's Candace.
Okay. Yeah, Candace.
I wanted to let you all know that I was planning to be in the office today, but I'm going to do the 12 to 1 launch on the workshop on actually using command for your 36 touch. I'm going to do part 1 today on my Zoom room from 12 to 1.
Okay, so Candace's Zoom room 12 to 1. And we'll be doing a workshop on the 36 touch, which implies that you should have your computer, you should be in front of it, because we want you to actually do it. It's a workshop, not a Candace lecturing you from the front of the room, okay?
Exactly. And today we'll be doing custom tags to set up the DTD2, and we'll be talking about client events. And then next week we'll be doing part 2, which is effective smart plans and the mailers, those kinds of things. So we'll get it all done, but it's going to take 2 weeks, I think. So
beautiful.
So we can just make it implemented for each of us.
Great. So 12 to 1 today and 12 to 1 next Friday. You guys have an awesome week, or I'm sorry, awesome day, awesome weekend. Give this conversation some serious contemplation. Okay. You don't need to share your standards unless you want additional accountability, but ask yourself, what should I be thinking of as a standard for my personal life? And what should I be thinking of as standard for my professional life? Okay. Y'all have a great day.
You too.
Bye. Bye.